Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you a new video in the story of CEO James and Diep, a story that seems peaceful on the surface, yet quietly hides emotional undercurrents that no one noticed at first. Inside the small house, the atmosphere was unusually calm. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the window, gently spreading across the floor and over colorful toys scattered around. Little Nee sat close beside an elderly man with silver hair, James's father. He sat there, his back slightly bent with age, his hands no longer as nimble as before, yet his eyes lit up every time he looked at his young granddaughter chattering happily by his side. Grandfather and granddaughter colored together, each clumsy stroke of the crayons filled with excitement. He patiently held the box of colored pencils, slowly asking Nee which color she liked more, orange or yellow, a duck or a car. Every question made Nee giggle, her clear laughter echoing through the room and breaking the usual stillness of the house. At times, she would tilt her head and think for a long while, as if these were the most important choices in the world, before innocently giving her answer. To Nee, it was simply a normal playtime, an afternoon with her grandfather nearby, with crayons, toys, and childish questions. She had no idea that to her grandfather, every passing moment was incredibly precious. After long days of business trips, exhausting travels, and endless meetings, his greatest joy now was contained in a child's laughter and the small yet comforting presence of his granddaughter. He looked at Nee and occasionally fell silent for a brief moment. Perhaps in his eyes was a sense of fulfillment, a feeling of returning home after busy days, a quiet comfort he did not need to put into words. The small house suddenly felt warmer, not because of the sunlight outside, but because of the natural bond between two people from different generations. No one in that moment could have imagined that this seemingly simple peace would become the starting point of a much greater panic. Elsewhere, at the same time, Diep and James began to feel uneasy. At first, it was only a vague, nameless feeling, a slight emptiness, as if something was wrong but not yet clear enough to say out loud. James looked around and, out of habit, called Nee's name, but there was no response. Diep froze as well, her eyes instinctively searching for the familiar little figure. Nee was no longer where she had been. There was no sign of her anywhere. The moment they realized it, the air seemed to sink. Diep felt her heart tighten, her legs suddenly weak. She collapsed down, almost unable to stand. Her trembling voice broke out of her chest, fragmented and filled with terror. "If Nee is gone, I don't know how I can go on living." Those words were not just a momentary fear. To Diep, Nee was not simply a child. She was her only emotional anchor, the light that had pulled her out of the darkest days of her life. In moments when she felt she had nothing left to cling to, it was Nee's existence that helped her stand again, that gave her a reason to keep going. James looked at Diep, his heart aching for her. He tried to remain calm, to be her support in that moment. He said the area was very secure, that he had asked his mother to check the security cameras, that perhaps a relative had taken Nee out without informing them yet. Every word he spoke carried reassurance, carried a fragile hope that everything was still under control. But the more James spoke, the greater the fear grew inside Diep. His reassurances were not enough to erase the rising sense of dread spreading through her. Her heart raced, dark thoughts overlapping one another, leaving her unable to calm herself anymore. The peace from earlier had completely vanished. In its place was a growing emptiness, anxiety, and helplessness, opening a new, storm-filled chapter in the story of James and Diep. The family quickly made the decision to report the case to the police. There was no time left for hesitation, no room for vague assumptions. Nee's disappearance, though there were no clear signs of danger yet, filled every passing minute with an indescribable sense of unease. Police officers arrived shortly afterward. Procedures were carried out carefully and professionally. All security cameras in the surrounding area were extracted and reviewed in full, every frame, every time window examined with precision. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as everyone fixed their eyes on the screens, hoping to find even the smallest detail related to Nee. After the review, 2 officers shared their initial assessment. Their voices were calm and clear, carrying the confidence of experience. There are no signs of abduction. No suspicious individuals appeared in the area. This neighborhood is generally considered very secure. Those words should have brought some relief. Instead, they did not ease anyone's mind. Because when no clear danger is found, it also means there is no concrete direction to follow. Then another piece of information was revealed, one that made the already heavy atmosphere even more suffocating. The camera inside the house was broken. It recorded nothing during the most critical time period. The last lead, the one that seemed closest to the truth, vanished just like that. Faces fell. The faint hope from earlier was quickly replaced by emptiness and helplessness. No one said a word, yet everyone understood that from this moment on, finding Nee would become far more difficult. Diep sat in silence, her hands clenched tightly together. Her mind replayed recent moments over and over, every small detail, every decision that had once seemed harmless. She blamed herself endlessly. If only she had paid closer attention. If only she hadn't been careless. If only she had stayed with Nee a little more. Those thoughts piled up, pressing heavily on her chest, making it hard to breathe. For Diep, the guilt at this moment was almost unbearable. She felt she had been negligent, that she had let slip away the most important thing in her life. With every second that passed, the torment inside her grew tighter, like an invisible grip giving her no chance to regain calm. James was no better. He lowered his head in silence, exhaustion and regret etched clearly across his face. It had been his suggestion to let Nee stay with his mother longer, believing it would be best for everyone. He had never imagined that such a small decision could lead to this situation. Inside James, waves of remorse rose, heavy and difficult to put into words. He blamed himself for being too careless, for believing everything was still under control. Now that Nee was gone, all his reasoning and former confidence felt meaningless. The entire house sank into a frighteningly heavy silence. There were no more hurried footsteps, no more urgent discussions, only long stretches of quiet, where each person faced their own worry and anxiety. No one dared to voice the worst possibilities, no one had the courage to name the terrifying scenarios circling in their minds. Yet even unspoken, the fear continued to grow with every passing minute. It crept into every corner of the house, clung to every thought, every glance. Time no longer moved normally, it became a crushing weight pressing down on everyone, signaling an unstable and uncertain journey waiting ahead. While the adults were still trapped in a whirlwind of worry and anxiety, somewhere else, little Nee was wandering alone in an unfamiliar place. The road before her was long and wide, yet frighteningly empty. The noisy sounds around her did not bring any sense of safety, only made her feel more confused and scared. The little girl sat down by the roadside, drawing her small legs close and hugging her knees tightly. Tears streamed down her innocent face, soaking the hem of her clothes. Nee cried uncontrollably, calling out for her mother in despair. At first, her voice was clear, then it gradually grew hoarse from exhaustion and fear. Each time she called out, she lifted her head, hoping a familiar figure would appear. But all that answered her were hurried, unfamiliar footsteps passing by, never stopping. Time dragged on slowly. Nee didn't know how long she had been sitting there. She only felt cold, hungry, and terrified. In her mind, there was just one thought: where was her mother, and why hadn't she come to find her yet? The feeling of being left alone made her little heart tremble with every beat. At that moment, a woman passed by. She stopped when she saw Nee crying by the roadside. At first, she stood at a distance, watching with hesitation in her eyes. She bent down and spoke gently, though her voice still carried caution. Nee looked up at her, eyes red and swollen, tears still falling. She stammered in reply, her trembling voice only managing to say that she was lost and looking for her mother. The woman hesitated. Many worries crossed her mind. She was afraid that taking the child away on her own might be wrong, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of unnecessary trouble. Those thoughts kept her standing there for quite a while, as if she were struggling with herself. But when she saw Nee crying until her voice was raw, her small shoulders shaking with fear, she simply couldn't turn away and walk on. In the end, compassion won. The woman sighed softly, then bent down to wipe away Nee's tears. She told the little girl she would help her find her mother, speaking slowly and gently, trying to make Nee feel safer. Her hand held Nee's tiny hand, not too tightly, but firmly enough to pass along the sense of security the child desperately needed at that moment. Nee looked up at her, fear still lingering in her eyes, but now there was a faint glimmer of trust. She obediently stood up and followed the woman. As they walked, Nee innocently said that when she found her mother again, she would give the woman a gift. It might only be a small toy, or simply a childish thank you, but to Nee, it was the only way she knew to express her gratitude. In the rush of everyday life, where everyone is busy with their own worries, there are still strangers willing to stop, willing to reach out a helping hand, simply out of kindness. No need for familiarity, no calculation involved, just an unwillingness to ignore the fear of a lost child. And it is precisely these seemingly small moments that become fragile yet precious anchors, in a story that is slowly moving toward days filled with turmoil. Just as everyone was nearly exhausted from worry, when the silence in the house had grown so heavy it felt suffocating, the door suddenly opened. James's father appeared, and beside him was little Nee. In that moment, time seemed to stop. No one reacted right away. Diep froze, her eyes wide, needing several seconds before she dared believe what she was seeing. James stood motionless, all the emotions he had been holding in for hours bursting in his chest. The house, which had been steeped in gloom, was suddenly torn open by the presence of the two people everyone had been desperately searching for. It turned out that everything had begun from something very simple. James's father had ended his business trip earlier than expected. He returned home feeling relieved, hoping to rest after long days away from his family. As soon as he arrived, he met Nee. The little girl ran up to him excitedly, saying she wanted to go out, to have some fun and clear her head. Seeing that eager look in her eyes, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. In his mind, it was just a short outing, a way to make up for the time he had been away. He didn't inform anyone. Not because he intended to hide it, but simply because he assumed everyone already knew, or believed there wouldn't be any problem. So he took me to a play area, went for walks, and let her enjoy herself all day. Nee's laughter echoed through playgrounds, completely separate from the panic that was quietly spreading elsewhere. Meanwhile, back at home, every passing minute felt unbearably heavy for Diep and James. They had no idea that Nee was happy and safe with a family member. All they felt was emptiness, the fear of loss, and the helplessness of being able to do nothing but wait. James stepped closer, his eyes on Nee, emotion impossible to hide. Inside him was a tangle of conflicting feelings, overwhelming relief that Nee was safe, mixed with anger that a single small oversight had plunged the entire family into utter panic. He didn't raise his voice, nor did he scold harshly. Still, the tension on his face showed that the shock had not yet faded. No one believed James's father had any bad intentions. Everyone understood that he was simply a grandfather who loved his grandchild and wanted to give her a happy day. But the absence of a simple heads-up, a brief phone call, had turned everything far more serious than it ever needed to be. The family had lived through hours of fear, through the worst assumptions, through the sense that they might lose the most precious thing at any moment. Diep stepped forward and wrapped me tightly in her arms. Her hands trembled, as if she had not yet fully escaped the terror she had just endured. Nee nestled into that embrace, her face still carefree, unaware that only hours earlier, her disappearance had driven the adults around her to despair. As for Nee, she simply looked up, smiled her familiar innocent smile, and said one very simple, very childlike sentence. "Today was so much fun." That single sentence made everyone breathe a sigh of relief, yet it also left behind a feeling difficult to describe. A child's joy is sometimes built upon fears that adults must bear. And from that moment on, the entire family understood that there are things which seem very small, but when connection is missing, when a simple message or phone call is absent, they can cause deep wounds that are not easily forgotten. In the end, everything came to a close with a sense of relief, but it was not a complete relief. Mixed within it was a quiet sense of lingering guilt, silently settling into the hearts of each family member. When the panic finally passed, when Nee was once again safe in loving arms, the emotions that had been suppressed throughout the long day finally surfaced more clearly than ever. Just one very small misunderstanding, one seemingly insignificant oversight, had been enough to push the entire family into despair, making them believe they were about to lose the most precious thing in their lives. During those hours, they had gone through every possible emotion, from fragile hope, to overwhelming fear, to helplessness when all they could do was wait and pray. No one said it out loud, but everyone had, at some point, imagined the worst. When everything returned to normal, the house looked the same, the family was whole again, but inside each person remained a mark left by an experience they would never forget. Diep understood that it takes only a brief moment of inattention, a small lapse in judgment, to shatter the peace she had worked so hard to protect. James also realized that no matter how strong or in control he believed himself to be, mistakes could still happen if communication and connection were missing at the right time. From that day on, the whole family slowly came to understand something very simple, yet deeply meaningful. Love is not just being together every day. Not just sharing meals or living under the same roof. Love is also taking responsibility for one another's emotions. It is timely communication, caring about things that may seem small. It is saying something, even briefly, even simply, so that the other person does not have to live in worry and fear. Because sometimes, what hurts people the most is not a major crisis, not a visible loss, but silence. A silence that is unintentional, not meant to harm, yet powerful enough to cause deeper damage than any harsh words. It leaves people anxious, self-blaming, and trapped in their most painful assumptions. After everything, the story of James, Diep, and little Nee does not end only with the safety of a child, it also opens up a quiet lesson for everyone who remains. That in life, love must go hand in hand with responsibility. Care must be accompanied by connection. And sometimes, just one timely sentence is enough to preserve an entire world of peace. Please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the next videos.
Xin chào mọi người. Chắc buồn nôn quá rồi. Quay trở lại với kênh của mình nhé. Ôi, đau đầu quá mọi người. Nên mình đi uống sữa rồi mình đi ngủ. Cảm ơn mọi người rất nhiều. Tạm biệt mọi người.